A birthday surprise. The air vibrated with the joyous shrieks of children launching themselves from the bouncy castle. Lily Chun, 10 years old today, stood slightly apart, a shy smile playing on her lips. Sunlight glinted off the rainbow sprinkles adorning her cupcake, a kaleidoscope of color against the vanilla frosting. She preferred the quiet observation to the chaotic energy of the bouncing masses, but the sheer exuberance was undeniably infectious. Even Mr. Henderson, the eternally grumpy neighbor from across the street, seemed to be tolerating the noise with a minimum of grumbling. Inside the inflatable castle, a miniature pandemonium reigned. Kevin, Lily's boisterous younger brother, was currently king of the mountain, shoving aside anyone who dared challenge his reign. Lily's best friend, Maya, was attempting a graceful dismount which ended in a rather less graceful tumble, eliciting peals of laughter from the onlookers. The adults, scattered strategically around the yard, sipped lemonade and exchanged polite conversation, their eyes darting nervously towards the bouncy castle every few seconds. Lily took a bite of her cupcake, the sugary sweetness momentarily eclipsing the cacophony. She'd spent weeks meticulously planning every detail of her party, from the hand-drawn invitations featuring pixelated unicorns to the custom-designed Level 10 Unlocked banner that hung proudly above the snack table. Coding was her passion, her escape, and she'd poured that passion into making her birthday a reflection of her interests. A shadow fell across her. "Having fun, birthday girl?" Her dad ruffled her hair, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Yeah," Lily said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. "It's perfect." Just then, a breathless figure burst through the gate, disrupting the idyllic scene. Mrs. Davison, their neighbor from next door, her face contorted with panic, stumbled towards the group of adults. Her usually neat bun was askew, strands of gray hair escaping and framing her ashen face. "It's Mrs. Rodriguez," she gasped, her voice cracking with desperation. "She's collapsed. I think she's had a stroke." A wave of silence washed over the yard, momentarily silencing the bouncing children. The adults exchanged confused glances, their polite chatter abruptly cut short. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of unease. "Collapsed." Mr. Chun, Lily's father, repeated, his brow furrowed with concern. "What happened?" "I don't know. I just went over to borrow some sugar, and I found her on the kitchen floor. She's not responding." Mrs. Davison wrung her hands, her eyes darting around frantically. A murmur rippled through the partygoers. Mrs. Rodriguez, a sweet, elderly woman who lived alone, was a beloved figure in the neighborhood. She was known for her meticulously tended rose garden and her habit of leaving small treats on their doorstep during the holidays. The thought of something happening to her sent a shiver down Lily's spine. "Someone call 911, Mrs. Davison cried, her voice rising in hysteria. A flurry of activity erupted. Mr. Henderson, surprisingly spry for his age, pulled out his phone and began dialing. Other adults rushed towards the gate, their faces etched with concern. The children, sensing the shift in mood, slowly trickled out of the bouncy castle, their playful shouts replaced by nervous whispers. Lily stood frozen, her cupcake forgotten in her hand. The perfect party she had so carefully planned was crumbling around her, replaced by the harsh reality of a neighbor in distress. She watched as her father joined the group huddled around Mrs. Davison, his face grim. He said something Lily couldn't hear, his tone serious and commanding. He was a doctor, after all, and in times like these, his calm demeanor was reassuring. Even Kevin seemed to have grasped the gravity of the situation, standing quietly beside Maya, his usual mischievous grin replaced by a look of apprehension. The air, once filled with the sounds of laughter and celebration, now crackled with a nervous energy, punctuated by the urgent tone of Mr. Henderson's voice as he spoke to the 911 operator. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles were the next intrusion, slicing through the late afternoon like knives. Lily knew, with a certainty that settled heavily in her stomach, that her birthday party was officially over, and something far more serious had just begun. Roses and sirens. The air hung thick with the scent of Mrs. Rodriguez's prize-winning roses, a cloying sweetness that usually brought a smile to everyone's face. Today it felt suffocating. The aroma mingled with the metallic tang of fear, a combination that clawed at Elias's throat. He knelt beside Maria, her face pale and slick with sweat, her breathing shallow and rapid. Then a sound sliced through the oppressive quiet. A distant wail, growing louder with each passing second. Sirens. Relief, sharp and immediate, flooded Elias. Help was coming. He squeezed Maria's hand, his own trembling. They're here, mi amor. They're here. The siren's cry intensified, echoing off the neatly manicured lawns and identical townhouses. It reached a fever pitch, then abruptly cut off. Silence. A tense, pregnant silence that stretched on, punctuated only by Maria's ragged breaths. Elias frowned. Why had it stopped? He strained to see past the small crowd that had gathered. A sea of worried faces reflecting the flashing lights of the ambulance. Then he saw it. A monstrous, obsidian SUV, parked with arrogant disregard, jutting out into the designated fire lane. Its sheer size and gleaming finish seemed to mock the urgency of the situation. A collective groan rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of disbelief turned to frustrated whispers. It can't be. Elias pushed his way through the throng, his anxiety morphing into a cold, simmering anger. He knew who it was. He didn't even need to see the personalized license plate. He reached the front of the crowd, and there it was. Park Queen, it read. He pressed his palms against the hood of the SUV, the metal vibrating faintly with the idling engine. Karen, he roared, his voice cracking with desperation. Karen, move your damn car. A figure emerged from one of the nearby townhouses, her arms crossed, a look of disdain etched on her face. Karen Block. Of course. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair gleamed under the flashing lights, each strand seemingly defying the chaos around her. Elias, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. There's no need to shout. I'm perfectly aware of the situation. Aware? Elias sputtered, gesturing wildly at the blocked ambulance. Are you blind, woman? My wife is in labor. The ambulance can't get through because of you. Karen remained unmoved, her expression unchanging. I was only popping in for a moment. I needed to drop off the revised HOA regulations. She gestured to a thick stack of papers clutched in her hand. Apparently, some people can't seem to follow the established guidelines for holiday decorations. Holiday decorations? Elias repeated, his voice barely a whisper. He felt a surge of rage so intense it threatened to consume him. He took a step towards her, his fists clenched. Elias, calm down, someone said, grabbing his arm. He shook them off, his gaze never leaving Karen's. My wife, Karen? My baby? This isn't about your stupid regulations. Karen sighed dramatically. Really, Elias, your histrionics are quite unnecessary. I'm sure the paramedics can manage a few extra steps. It's hardly the end of the world. She started to turn away, her back ramrod straight. Karen, please. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, her voice surprisingly firm. Those roses I gave you for your birthday? Remember? Please move your car. That woman needs help. Karen paused, a flicker of something, perhaps guilt, perhaps annoyance, crossing her face. But it was fleeting. She pursed her lips. Fine, she said, her tone grudging. But this doesn't excuse you from removing those inflatable snowmen by December 26th. Mrs. Rodriguez. She sauntered towards her SUV, retrieved the keys from her designer handbag, and with agonizing slowness, backed the vehicle out of the fire lane. The ambulance doors swung open, and paramedics rushed towards Maria, their faces grim. Elias watched them go, his heart pounding in his chest. The scent of roses still hung in the air, a perverse reminder of the beauty that could exist alongside such utter callousness. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was far from over. The HOA's nemesis. The wail of the siren bounced off the stucco walls of the complex, a frantic echo in the otherwise still afternoon. Mrs. Rodriguez, clutching her rosary, peered through the gap in her curtains. Dios mío, she whispered, recognizing the urgent two-tone signal. Someone's in trouble. Across the courtyard, a ripple of similar anxiety spread. Heads popped out of doorways, conversations hushed, and the air thrummed with unspoken fear. Then came the collective groan, a low, drawn-out sound that could curdle milk. It wasn't the siren itself that elicited this response, but the sight obstructing the ambulance's path, a gleaming, oversized, pearl-white SUV. No, hissed Mr. Henderson, his face reddening. It can't be. He grabbed his binoculars from the windowsill, confirming his worst suspicions. It is her. That damn Escalade. The word spread like wildfire. Karen's SUV. She's done it again. Blocked the fire lane. The paramedics' faces grim wrestled the gurney from the back of the ambulance. One, a young woman with bright pink hair escaping her cap, jogged towards the SUV, her hand raised in a gesture that was half plea, half threat. "Excuse me. We need to get through. This is an emergency." Behind her, the other paramedic, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, was already on his radio, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "Dispatch, we have a situation. Vehicle obstructing the fire lane, blocking access to Unit 3B. Requesting immediate police assistance." Mrs. Rodriguez made the sign of the cross. 3B. That was the Millers. Their daughter, little Lily, had been coughing all week. Mr. Henderson lowered his binoculars, shaking his head. "She never learns. Remember the time she parked in the handicap spot because the regular ones were too small? Or when she painted her front door that god-awful shade of turquoise, claiming it was coastal chic?" Another neighbor, a lanky teenager named David, chimed in. "And the Christmas lights? She left them up until June. Said they were festive year-round." The pink-haired paramedic returned, her face flushed. "No one's inside. The keys are, oh, you've got to be kidding me. They're in the ignition." She pointed to a small, laminated card tucked under the windshield wiper. "I'll only be a minute. Text me if there's a problem." She read the phone number aloud. A collective groan rose from the small crowd of onlookers. The paramedics exchanged a look. The burly one started maneuvering the gurney towards the narrow gap between the SUV and the curb, his movements precise but strained. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The other one pulled out her phone, presumably to text Karen. A low rumble filled the air, not from the ambulance, but from a nearby pickup truck. A burly man with a shaved head and a thick neck emerged, a tow chain in his hand. "Enough is enough," he growled. "This has been going on for too long." Mr. Henderson gasped. "That's Big Tony. He owns the landscaping company. He's usually so mild-mannered." Big Tony strode towards the SUV, his jaw clenched. He hooked the tow chain to the Escalade's bumper. The crowd held its breath. This wasn't just a parking violation anymore. This was war. The pink-haired paramedic rushed over. "Sir, please. We need to get through quickly, but we can't damage the vehicle." Big Tony paused, his eyes softening slightly. "I'll be careful," he said, his voice still rough. "But that baby's more important than her precious car." He climbed into his truck, revved the engine, and with a screech of tires and a protesting groan from the Escalade, he slowly began to pull. The SUV lurched forward, inching out of the fire lane. Just enough. A code in crisis. Lily's half-eaten cupcake lay abandoned on the picnic table, its sprinkles mocking her. The festive bunting, usually a source of delight, felt like a cruel joke. All she could think about was Mrs. Rodriguez, trapped in her house, the ambulance unable to reach her because of that woman's car. A wave of guilt washed over Lily. It was her birthday, and she should be happy, but how could she be when someone was in trouble? A memory flickered her dad, hunched over his laptop, lines of code scrolling down the screen. "It's like giving instructions to a robot, Lilypad," he'd said, his voice patient, telling it exactly what to do. He'd spent hours teaching her the basics, showing her how to make a little turtle move across the screen, draw shapes, respond to commands. She hadn't really used it much since he wasn't around to code with her. But now a spark ignited in her mind. Her drone. The one Uncle Joe had given her for her birthday last year. It had a camera, a surprisingly good one. And, more importantly, she could control it with her tablet. "Mom," she blurted, interrupting the hushed conversation between her mother and Mrs. Davison. "I have an idea. My drone." Her mom looked at her, distracted. "Lily, honey, now isn't really the time." "But listen," Lily insisted, grabbing her mom's hand and pulling her towards the edge of the yard, away from the other guests. "I can fly the drone over to Mrs. Rodriguez's house. We can see if she's okay, see what's happening. Maybe even, I don't know, talk to her through the drone speaker." Her mom's eyes widened, the worry lines on her face softening slightly. "Lily, that's a really good idea. But do you think you can?" Lily nodded fiercely, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "I can try. I remember what Dad taught me. I can code a quick program to make it fly a specific route, avoid obstacles." She trailed off, already picturing the drone's camera feed in her mind. She raced to the garage, her fingers already itching to get to her tablet. The drone, a sleek, silver model, sat in its carrying case on a shelf. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sun streaming through the garage door. She grabbed the case and her tablet, hurrying back to the picnic table. The other kids, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, gathered around, their faces etched with curiosity. Even Mr. Davison, usually engrossed in his phone, looked up with interest. Lily ignored them, her focus narrowing. She opened the tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. The coding app Dad had installed, a simplified version designed for kids, popped up. She remembered his lessons, the syntax, the logic. She quickly started piecing together the code. A command to take off, then coordinates for Mrs. Rodriguez's house, instructions to maintain a specific altitude, to avoid the trees, the power lines. It was a frantic race against time, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Lily, are you sure you know what you're doing?" her mom asked, her voice laced with concern. Almost got it," Lily muttered, her eyes glued to the screen. She added a loop, a repeating command to circle the house, broadcasting her voice through the drone speaker. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she typed the final command, execute. A collective breath was held as Lily tapped the screen. The drone whirred to life, its propellers spinning faster and faster. It lifted off the table, hovering for a moment before shooting towards Mrs. Rodriguez's house, a tiny silver messenger against the clear blue sky. Drone intervention. The last bite of birthday cake tasted of regret. Inside, the ambulance strobe bathed the scene in alternating waves of scarlet and azure, a frantic light show against the backdrop of the deflated bounce house. Karen's ostentatious SUV remained, a chrome behemoth declaring its owner's self-importance. Lily couldn't remain idle, not with Mrs. Rodriguez. She sprinted toward the garage, ignoring her mother's anxious call. Her drone, the Sky Wanderer 3000, a gift of technological affection from her grandfather, rested on its charging pad. A daring, almost reckless plan sparked to life. Snatching the drone, Lily's fingers, slick with sugary residue, struggled with the power switch. "Work? Damn it," she whispered, finally coaxing it to life. She clipped on the tiny speaker, usually reserved for backyard science experiments. Perfect. Outside, the air crackled with unease. Paramedics hurried with grim determination. Karen, conspicuously absent, likely sheltered in her climate-controlled haven, feigning ignorance. Lily set the drone on the driveway's edge. Its rotor spun, accelerating from a whine to a steady thrum. Lifting smoothly, it ascended above the bounce house, a miniature mechanical insect against the agitated sky. Inhaling deeply, she activated the carefully constructed pre-recorded message. Her voice, amplified and slightly distorted, echoed across the manicured lawns. "Attention, please. Public service announcement. Vehicle obstructing emergency access. License plate Bravo Lima Oscar Charlie Kilo, please relocate immediately. Vehicle obstructing emergency access." The effect was instant. Head swiveled. Conversations died. Even the paramedics paused, their faces displaying a surprised, almost hopeful curiosity. Lily guided the drone toward Karen's SUV, hovering directly above its pristine surface. The message repeated, louder now, reverberating between the houses. Vehicle obstructing emergency access. License plate Bravo Lima Oscar Charlie Kilo, please relocate immediately. A curtain stirred in Karen's living room. Hesitantly, the front door opened. Karen emerged, blinking against the glare, her expression a study in bewildered irritation. She resembled a badger caught in headlights. "What on earth?" she mumbled, shading her eyes with a precisely sculpted hand. The drone, an insistent gnat, buzzed above her. Vehicle obstructing emergency access. License plate Bravo Lima Oscar Charlie Kilo, please relocate immediately, Lily's voice repeated, mirroring Karen's earlier condescension. Karen's lips compressed into a thin, disapproving line. She scanned the street, searching for the source of the amplified voice. Her eyes found Lily, standing at the edge of her driveway, clutching the drone's controller. Recognition flooded her face, followed by a wave of incandescent rage. Lily stood firm, her heart hammering, a frantic tattoo against her ribs. This felt pivotal, a line etched in the dust. She had shattered the unspoken rules, challenged the alpha's dominance. Retreat was impossible. Stubborn standoff. Lily's 10th birthday party had screeched to a halt. The bouncy castle deflated in the distance, a sad, rubbery pancake. The half-eaten cake sat forlornly on the picnic table, its sugary frosting melting in the afternoon sun. All eyes were fixed on the ambulance, its red lights flashing impotently behind Karen Block's monstrous, pearl-white SUV. Karen emerged from the nail salon, her freshly lacquered crimson claws glinting. She sauntered toward her vehicle, phone pressed to her ear, oblivious to the chaos she was causing. The wail of the ambulance siren seemed to bounce off her designer sunglasses. Yes, Tiffany, the gel is divine. Absolutely divine. I told you, Serenity Nails is the only place. She trailed off as she finally registered the flashing lights and the mounting tension radiating from the gathered crowd. The paramedic, sweat beading on his brow, gestured frantically. Karen sighed dramatically, peeling her phone away from her ear. What is all the commotion? She drawled, her voice dripping with disdain. Ma'am, we need you to move your vehicle. This is an emergency. We have a patient in critical condition, the paramedic pleaded, his voice tight with urgency. Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily remembered. The one who always gave her extra candy on Halloween. Karen arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Critical condition? Oh, dear. Well, I'll only be a minute. Just need to back out. She made no move to get in the car. A minute could be the difference between life and death. The paramedic's voice cracked with frustration. Please, ma'am, every second counts. Karen pursed her lips. Don't raise your voice at me. I'm sure whatever it is can wait a few minutes. It's not like the whole world revolves around whoever it is. She emphasized the last phrase with a dismissive flick of her wrist. Lily felt a surge of anger. Her small fists clenched. This wasn't just about a blocked fire lane, it was about someone's life. She glanced at her drone hovering silently nearby. An idea sparked in her mind. But Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily cried out, her voice trembling slightly. She's really sick. She needs to go to the hospital right now. Karen didn't even glance at Lily. Run along, sweetheart. The adults are talking. She turned back to her phone, resuming her conversation as if nothing were happening. Yes, Tiffany, as I was saying, the cuticle oil is essential. The crowd began to murmur, their faces a mixture of disbelief and outrage. Even the usually placid Mr. Peterson was shaking his head in disgust. Lily knew she had to do something. She grabbed the drone's controller. Her fingers fumbled momentarily, but she quickly regained control. She tapped a series of buttons, activating the drone's auxiliary lights. They blinked on, mimicking the ambulance's urgent rhythm. Then she found the sound effects menu. A childish, synthesized siren filled the air, overlaying the ambulance's real one, creating a cacophony of noise. Karen flinched, finally pulling the phone from her ear. What in the world? She sputtered, her eyes widening in annoyance as she looked up at the flashing, buzzing drone. The combined effect of the lights and the amplified siren was jarring. It was impossible to ignore. Lily aimed the drone directly at Karen, hovering it a few feet away from her face. Move your car. Lily yelled, her voice amplified by the drone's speaker. Mrs. Rodriguez needs help. Karen's face contorted in fury. She took a step toward Lily, her crimson nails curled into claws. You little brat. You're going to pay for this. Community pressure. Lily, cupcake forgotten, watched as Mrs. Rodriguez was wheeled toward the waiting ambulance. The siren's keen pierced the sudden hush. But the vehicle remained stubbornly still, blocked by Karen's SUV. A steel island marooned in the fire lane. A restless murmur stirred through the onlookers. Then, Mrs. Davison, the retired educator whose voice once tamed classrooms, advanced. Karen, move that car, she declared, her tone ringing with authority. Others echoed the sentiment, their voices coalescing into a wave of disapproval. Move it. Move the car. The demand amplified, fueled by mounting frustration and shared indignation. Lily felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Maybe, just maybe, they could sway Karen. Above, Leo's drone, sensing the shift, amplified its efforts. It dove, a buzzing gnat harassing Karen's space. Leo had equipped it with fresh ammunition, a recording of infant wails interwoven with a blaring car horn, a symphony of annoyance. Karen swatted at the drone, her carefully sculpted hair briefly disheveled. Get that infernal thing away, she snapped, but Leo, safely anonymous in the crowd, held his position. The drone persisted, its irritating hum and simulated cries saturating the air. Even Mr. Henderson, ordinarily reserved, his passion reserved for cultivating award-winning roses, added his voice to the rising chorus. Teenagers, initially engrossed in their phones, now looked up, captivated by the unfolding spectacle. One began streaming the scene, broadcasting Karen's defiance to their followers. The pressure intensified. The drone whirred. The neighbors pressed their demands. The ambulance siren pulsed, a rhythmic plea. A sheen of perspiration dotted Karen's brow. Her gaze darted, seeking purchase on sympathetic faces. The unified front was unnerving. They were no longer isolated individuals, but a collective force. Lily detected a subtle shift in Karen's expression, not contrition, perhaps, but a dawning realization that she was losing ground. The drone amplified the sound of the distressed infant. Fine. Fine. Karen relented, throwing her hands up in surrender. I'm moving it. She fumbled with her keys, her movements betraying a tremor. The chanting quieted as she unlocked the vehicle and slid behind the wheel. The engine roared, shattering the momentary silence. With a screech of tires, she yanked the SUV backward, narrowly missing Mr. Henderson's trash bins. A collective exhalation swept through the gathered neighbors. The ambulance doors clicked shut, and with its siren screaming, it finally lurched forward, destined for the hospital. Lily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding captive. The unified cry dissolved into scattered conversations. The tension lingered, thick as humidity, yet now laced with a hard-won sense of accomplishment. They had stood their ground. They had faced Karen, and they had prevailed. But the unspoken question hung in the air: what would come next? Karen's face was flushed, whether with anger or embarrassment Lily couldn't discern. A rose saved. The wail of the siren sliced through the festive chatter and the lingering strains of Happy Birthday. Red and blue lights pulsed across the faces of Lily's guests, painting them in alternating hues of alarm and morbid fascination. Two paramedics, faces grim and efficient, burst through the gate, their medical bags slapping against their thighs. Where is she? One demanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. Lily, still clutching the deflated unicorn balloon, pointed a trembling finger towards the patio. Over there. Mrs. Rodriguez. She just collapsed. The paramedics moved with practiced speed, pushing past bewildered parents and wide-eyed children. Lily watched, heart hammering against her ribs as they knelt beside Mrs. Rodriguez. One checked her pulse, the other began hooking her up to a monitor. A low, guttural groan escaped Mrs. Rodriguez's lips. BP's dropping, one paramedic announced, his voice tight. We need to get her stabilized. Start in 4. Lily felt a surge of nausea. The vibrant colors of her party seemed to mock the seriousness of the situation. A plastic tiara, discarded on the lawn, glinted under the flashing lights like a macabre jewel. The paramedics worked swiftly, their movements a blur of medical expertise. They spoke in clipped, technical terms that Lily couldn't understand, but the urgency in their voices was unmistakable. One of them barked instructions to a police officer who had arrived on the scene, directing him to clear a path to the ambulance. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, they managed to stabilize Mrs. Rodriguez. Her breathing was still shallow and raspy, but her color had improved slightly. Carefully, they lifted her onto a stretcher and wheeled her towards the gate. As they passed, one of the paramedics paused, looking directly at Lily. He was young, with kind eyes framed by dark circles. You, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. You called 911? Lily nodded, her voice caught in her throat. You did good, kid. Real good. Calling when you did, it might have saved her life. He gave her a brief, tired smile before hurrying to join his partner. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sealing Mrs. Rodriguez inside. The siren wailed again. A mournful cry that echoed through the quiet suburban street. As the ambulance pulled away, leaving a trail of flashing lights in its wake, a hush fell over Lily's party. Mrs. Davison, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. Well, she announced, her voice a little too loud, I suppose we should try to salvage what's left of the cake. Lily, dear, you were very brave. But Lily wasn't listening. She was still watching the ambulance disappear down the street. A knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. She hadn't saved Mrs. Rodriguez. The paramedics had. All she had done was dial a number. But then Mrs. Garcia, her usually severe face softened with concern, approached Lily. Mija, she said, placing a warm hand on Lily's shoulder. You were so quick. I was frozen. You knew exactly what to do. That was very smart, Lilybug. Other parents chimed in, their voices filled with admiration and relief. That was quick thinking, Lily. You're a little hero. Your parents must be so proud. Even Tommy, who usually delighted in teasing her, looked at her with a newfound respect. Whoa, Lily, he said, you were like, super calm. I would have totally freaked out. The news of Lily's quick thinking spread like wildfire among the remaining guests. The mood shifted, the earlier festive atmosphere replaced by a sense of shared relief and a touch of awe. The party, once a celebration of Lily's 10th birthday, had become something else entirely, a testament to the courage of a 10-year-old girl who had, in a moment of crisis, risen to the occasion. The unicorn balloon, still clutched in her hand, seemed a little less deflated now. Justice and innovation. The sterile scent of antiseptic stung Lily's nostrils as she stepped into Mrs. Rodriguez's hospital room. Balloons bobbed listlessly in the corner, a weak echo of the party that felt like a lifetime ago. Guilt gnawed at her. She'd been so caught up in the bouncy house and the cake, she hadn't even noticed Mrs. Rodriguez collapse. "Lily, Mija, come in, come in." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was raspy but warm. She was propped up in bed, a frail figure amidst the crisp white sheets. "I hear you were quite the little hero." Lily shuffled closer, clutching a small, hand-drawn card. I just called 911. I didn't do anything special." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, a network of wrinkles crinkling around her eyes. "Nonsense. You were quick thinking. The doctor said every minute mattered. Because of you, I'll be back tending my roses in no time." She reached out a hand, her fingers surprisingly strong as they squeezed Lily's. "Thank you, Lily. From the bottom of my heart." Relief washed over Lily, chasing away some of the lingering anxiety. "I'm just glad you're okay." The following week, the HOA meeting was packed. The air crackled with a tension thicker than the Florida humidity. Even the usually unflappable Mr. Henderson looked harried. The main item on the agenda, parking regulations. Clearly, Mr. Henderson began, his voice strained. "The events of last Saturday have highlighted a critical flaw in our enforcement of parking restrictions." Karen Block sat in the back row, her arms crossed, a defiant glint in her eyes. She hadn't apologized, not to Mrs. Rodriguez, not to Lily, not to anyone. Her silence only fueled the simmering anger in the room. One by one, neighbors spoke, their voices rising in frustration. Stories emerged: delivery trucks blocked, emergency vehicles delayed, elderly residents forced to walk long distances. The collective anger crystallized into a demand for change. The revised regulations were strict. Increased fines, towing for repeat offenders, and designated emergency vehicle access points were all implemented. Mr. Henderson even proposed a new system, an online portal where residents could report parking violations with photographic evidence. "This isn't a police state." Karen finally burst out, her voice shrill. "This is just ridiculous. You're all overreacting." Her outburst was met with a wall of stony silence. The tide had turned. Her complaints sounded hollow, selfish, and utterly out of touch. The closure came in two very different forms. Lily received a letter from the city council. She was invited to a ceremony where she would be awarded the Future Innovator Award for her quick thinking and community spirit. The letter praised her calm demeanor and her resourcefulness in a crisis. Karen Block received a different letter delivered by certified mail. It detailed the fines she incurred for obstructing an emergency vehicle along with a court order mandating 50 hours of community service at the local hospital. She was assigned to assist in the patient transport department. Lily, dressed in a new dress the color of sunshine, stood on a small stage, a bouquet of sunflowers clutched in her hands. The mayor smiled down at her, his voice booming through the microphone. "Lily Chin, you are an inspiration to us all." Across town, Karen Block pushed a gurney down a long, sterile hallway, the rhythmic squeak of the wheels a constant reminder of her misdeeds. The faces of the patients blurred into a single, accusing gaze. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in a polished metal door, a woman humbled, finally forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Lily beamed, the applause washing over her like a warm wave. The world felt bright, full of possibilities. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her heart that even a 10-year-old could make a difference. And sometimes justice, like innovation, came in unexpected packages.